I'm Zach Martin with Brian Ray. Brian Ray has become a friend of mine over the past couple of years. I'm a big fan of his work. We are all familiar with how we have to wear a face mask. Now, the reason why I have mine on right now, and you have your bandana, I could see that, is
Hmm.
this is made by Debbie Turner, who was Marta in The Sound of Music, and you might recognize the fabric here. These are the curtains that were used to make the play clothes for the kids in The Sound of Music.
Now that is so far down at a long road, but I love it. I love your dedication to this factoid.
Well, I thought you would find that interesting.
It is.
Um,
It's fascinating. I
and
could do
here's
a. We could do a podcast just on that.
just on that. Now, Brian, a lot of people, when it comes to wearing the face mask, I think there's a lot of, let's just say, wrong ideas about it, right? Does that mean that
Yes.
if you wear it all over the place, you won't get COVID? No, not necessarily. But I was speaking to a person yesterday. Now, I've talked to doctors about this, and everybody does have their opinion about it. But a friend of mine who has HIV made a great point, and I think that this is all anybody needs to know. No, it's not going to prevent you from getting COVID-19, but what it will do is lower the viral load that you're exposed to. So, thus, reducing I guess, the severity of it. So, it makes sense to me. Now, it wasn't from a doctor, but a man who has HIV who really understands how you got to wash your hands and wear your mask. And, it's okay. I'm all right with it.
It's the very least we can do.
Uh,
Plus,
Exactly.
virologists and epidemiologists have said this is the one simple thing we can all do, but it got sort of politicized and
Yeah, it did,
tribalized.
and,
It's too
everybody's
bad.
yeah, I get it, I
It's
get
really
it,
too
yeah.
bad.
I
It's a sad thing because we could really have avoided maybe 150,000 of the 250,000 deaths we could have
could
avoided.
have, it's hard to say, but here's the thing. We should have fun with the masks. Look what I did, or you can wear the bandana, you can be the cowboy. You get to play a character. And it's just about loving thy neighbor. That's it, plain and simple.
That's
It
it. I
doesn't
mean,
uh,
you know, when you drive a car going 85, probably good to wear a seatbelt. It's
right.
now the law because it saves lives. Think of it like a seatbelt
Very well put. Now,
for your face.
let's move on to your music.
All right.
Here's what I really enjoyed. Now, I'm gonna maybe put you on the spot. I don't know if you have it. Do you have, by any chance, any of the sleeves for your new singles?
Not yet.
Okay.
Um, we have a digital photos of it, but I do not have the physical singles yet. They are on their way, I'm told, any minute.
All right. So you do it the vinyl version as well as the digital release as well. What
That's
I
right.
like about what you do is, and we've talked about this before, I think it's great to release 45s or the singles. So you got the A side and the B side. You got a new thing on the A. On the flip is Whiskey Train, which we play in New HD. Great songs. I also like Tears of a Clown that you did with Smokey Robinson. Fantastic. I love your music. I love your guitar play. I love the fact that you love classic cars. I love the fact that you hang out in the Santa Monica area. It's another place I just like visiting on a regular basis when I get out to California. What is maybe somebody tuning in or watching for the very first time? They hear the name Brian Ray. Maybe they don't know who you are. So, how about a little bit of your rock and roll biography? We've done this in the past, but we haven't done it on video.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm like all of those things that you just mentioned that I love, plus the vintage guitars and vintage cars. I'm just an American boy, what can I say? I'm born and raised out here in Los Angeles in a little town called Glendale, which is the gateway to Burbank, if you didn't know. And I have been, in love with rock and roll music since I was 3 years old, and I first discovered it when the progenitors of rock and roll came up around us. I don't know if you're quite my age, but in any way, I was then influenced by folk rock and then by Motown and surf music, and I had a transistor radio because I'm that old, and I had that little
Oh,
one ear piece, and I had my I had pirate radio tuned in
I
to Wolfman
love
Jack.
that. That's a great song, Pirate Radio. As soon as you mentioned the transistor radio, Pirate Radio, where you have 1060 ads, Wolfman Jack. I love playing that song on the radio. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
that is such an amazing song. And we
yeah,
haven't talked, I don't think, since you had Pirate Radio out, have we?
I think we may have not talked since before that, but yeah, the idea of that was that it was the discovery of a new world. It was almost like getting your first car or something, except that I
Yeah.
was 7 years old, got a transistor radio, discovered this pirate radio station blasting out of Tijuana with some ungodly amount of wattage, illegal in the States. That's why it was
Right.
pirate. That's why it was in Tijuana, not San Diego. And the DJ, the young DJ who was playing these great songs from the 1950s, like rhythm and blues, black music, this was Wolfman Jack. And he was playing the music that was the foundation of rock and roll. And I fell in love with it at that sort of very base level as a young boy and never looked back.
And that song is fantastic. Let me tell you, if you're listening, you want to treat yourself. Pirate Radio by Brian Ray, definitely great. Especially if you're a disc jockey playing it on the radio, because you get the Wolfman Jack and you get the AM 1060, whatever the station was. Then you also wrote the song, correct me if I'm wrong, One Heartbeat, correct?
I did indeed, yeah, 30
All right.
some years ago for Smokey Robinson.
Amazing. This is and you also did a cover of that along with the release of Tears of a Clown at the same time, which you did a remix, and I guess you put your name on it finally. Working with Smokey Robinson, I have to tell you, I think that he's totally awesome. And let me just give you a little sidebar about Smokey Robinson.
Okay.
It's been kind of tough. We had our 21st anniversary. My wife and I were married on November 11th, 1999. A day I'll never forget, right? Veterans Day. Ah. Um, so we couldn't really here in New Jersey go out and celebrate, I guess the way we're used to. My poor in-laws, they actually went and to some favorite restaurant and they got it to go and they ate in the car, which was kind of cute. So I couldn't go get the typical um American greeting card, but I found on americangreetingcard.com, Smokey will sing for your loved one. Sent it one to Sophie, who really likes that kind of Americana, and there was William Shatner and one other one. Oh, Michael Bolton. They all did these songs, and they would personalize it. So it was Emily, how you doing, Emily? And they would do the whole song and the lights and stuff. So Smokey found a way to still make magic, through the mystery of digital. I don't know even what you call it, but I would suggest check out American. What's the name of those cards? I just said it. They're American. There's some sort of cards I found
Okay,
online.
great.
Yeah, and he
Fantastic.
does the
I
video.
love that idea. How cool of him. Yeah, Smokey's an incredibly generous spirit. And of course, I feel super blessed to have a song that I wrote with my buddy Steve Legasic many years ago to be picked up and covered by him and then to get arrangement credit. And then he used it as his second single and he titled the album that included it after the song. It was One Heartbeat was the name of the album. I guess that was 1987 or something like that.
Something
And it
like
went
that.
on to be a very, very big record for him. Now, when it came time for me to do another single for Wicked Cool Records, a Little Stevens fine label there in New York, they suggested I do maybe try some garage soul. So I thought about it and I thought, well, One Heartbeat, but the original version, if you remember, was kind of a slow jam.
One heartbeat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind
I
of
remember
slow
playing it
and
on the overnights at HB 107 out in the East End of Long Island. That's where I got my start. I remember
is
playing
that right? Amazing. In any case, it was a slow jam. It's not really right for underground garage, but I just kind of reimagined it. I got my songwriting partner Steve over here, and I said, let's think of an up tempo thing, and I started double time drums like an old Motown hit, and then he came up with this very simple fuzz guitar line, down, 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 down. And I went, "You're a genius." That's all. Just those notes. They didn't exist before. No one's heard those notes. Actually, they're very common notes. And so we employed that and did a really fun version of One Heartbeat that is very garagey. We added real horns, real people playing together in a real room. Go figure. It always lends itself to that feeling of exuberance that you find in good music.
Well, what I like is your interpretation or reinterpretation of it, as you might have said. That works well in more songs than people realize. For instance, I recently interviewed Cindy Blackman Santana, and her husband Carlos redid Imagine by John Lennon. It is amazing. You got to check it out. You
I
have to
will.
put it on your, yeah, make sure you listen to that. She's got an album out, Give the Drummer Some. Fantastic. Anyway, back to you, Brian Ray. I get so excited about talking in music. You never know where any of these interviews are going to go.
Same here.
Let's talk about these new singles. Got a New Thing and Whiskey Train. Talk about the composition. Where did you get the inspiration for it? Give us a little bit behind the record kind of story.
Well, so I've been doing 2 singles a year for Wicked Cool Records, Little Steven's label, and that means 4 songs a year because these are vinyl singles, which are A and B side, as you just mentioned. So when it came time to do my second single for 2020, I started with the lick. Do 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 do. And first of all, it was just half that long. And then I said, "Whoa, what if I go crazy and make the lick twice as long?" Which is a little bit unusual for a riff rock song. Usually people go for those sort of 2-bar phrases that repeat. I know that sounds like sort of musical nerdiness, but I decided to make it a longer lick. And that gave me a lot of energy and excitement, and it had a very garagey sound to it. So then it was about writing the verse chords, and the verse chords just match what I'm implying with the lick. Do 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 da 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 do da. So those are the chords. So in the verse, I get away from the lick and just play the chords that I just implied. Right? It's science. It's just science. And then when it came time to write a chorus, I had a completely different chorus at first. That's the big hook part that everyone hooks on to. And in the case of this one, it's where I start singing, "I got a new thing." Okay, so I had a completely different chorus in mind, and I ditched it because it was kind of wordy and ended up with something much more simple. And then it came time to start finishing the lyric. And I did sort of 2 different iterations of the lyric. They were both similar in tone. That was sort of like a revenge song, like "You're going to get yours and I'm going to be happy when you do" kind of a song. So it's very typical in the garage rock genre. And but I made it even simpler, and then I started to change the cadence of how the lyric happens, and I came up with this weird idea, which is sometimes called a building lyric. Well, you'll start the line, and then you'll add more words to the same line, and then you'll switch it. And that's kind of what I ended up doing with this lyric. And it was very, very fun to write. So it took a long time to germinate the song, for it to sort of marinate in my mind and in my body. And it's weird. I have this process where I don't even start recording until I can actually hear the record in my imagination. By the time I can hear the record in the imagination, the recording is instant. It took me a day to do all the recording. And that just happens because I'm not fishing around through 8,000 different snare drums. I know what I'm looking for because I'm just now filling in the blanks. And that's the process of the writing of that song.
And I guess it's probably similar to Whiskey Train, the B-side, pretty much.
Whiskey Train's different because that's a cover of an old, rare album track from Procol Harum. And it was written by Robin Trower and
Wow, cool.
and Keith Reed, their old longtime lyricist. And in the case of Whiskey Train, I was approached by my friend who sang it, a guest vocalist, Carla Olson, who asked me if I wanted to do a duet for an album that was a train themed album. And I suggested this song. She said yes. I started the track. She came and sang it. And it was a song that I used to do in my high school band. It was just a song that I thought was really tough and cool and had a great guitar lick, and just enjoyed doing a new version of it with kind of an expanded chorus and some background vocals. And yeah, just had fun.
That's awesome. I mean, and when you do something like that, to find a gem in the pile, so to speak, and to dust it off and put your spin on it, that's really an awesome tribute to the writers of the song. I guess you're a Robin Trower fan, and I never really understood Bridge of Sighs until I was in Venice. So there's that. I'm like, oh,
Interesting.
that's why, this song is like it is. Now, one thing that I don't know if people know this about you, but I like to brag about you. I'm like, hey, I know Billy Ray. He plays guitar when Paul McCartney is on tour. Um, you still do that, I guess, when Paul goes on the road. You're still part of his lineup.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. If we ever get back to the good old days of playing music live for people, I hope to be there standing by his side again.
Right, right, right. So, I like to have fun with Paul in many ways. I mean, I've met him once and I had fun with him on the elevator. I don't have to repeat the story. I think I might have told you it. Um, when I play A Beautiful Night, for instance, is brand new from Paul. And I listen to it, I'm like, it's so easy to be Paul McCartney. I mean, the guy just like puts it together in 5 to 10 minutes. He's got a hit song. Great, yay. I mean, scrambled eggs, right? Turns out that yesterday I'm Paul. I'm just, everything just comes to me so easily. And I'm just wondering, what kind of influence does Paul have on you as a writer? Does it is it more liberating? Because I get the sense that Paul just makes it simple. He doesn't overthink it. Like, all right, Penny Lane's nice. I went to the barber shop over there. I'm going to make a song about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Fun. Well, Paul serves as, a mentor, but an inspiration to all of us. And if you're a songwriter and a musician, you can't help to have been touched by his incredible breadth of material and this long arc of an astounding career that he's had. But it's always just been driven by his love for song, his love for melody, and my impression that it does sort of come fairly easily to him. He does craft music, but he doesn't work at music. He often says, well, Brian, you don't work music, you play music. And that little bit of wisdom, that little point of view on songwriting has been very helpful to me, not that I ever labored it, but as a songwriter and a producer, arranger, you can get bogged down and think about those 8,000 different snare drums you could use in the digital realm. He just makes it very easy, and it's all so lovely. And yeah, it's a real inspiration to me. I mean, geez, you can't hang out with that guy for now 19 years and not feel the resulting inspiration.
I think that would be awesome to be able to just hang out with him for the day and have him, give me some vegan ideas, some vegan cooking tips, right? Because he's the master of the vegan food.
You could
I
do
think
that.
that would be awesome. And what would I ask? I probably would treat him like I do everybody else. That's what I do. I get the sense, the one thing about Paul that I like, because I've seen the pictures, like he takes the train, from the Hamptons into the city. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's brave of him. And nobody bothers him. Or he'll be at a club somewhere in Hoboken and all of a sudden get on stage and start singing Twist and Shout, just always having a good time. The guy's the life of the party. So I got to tell you, a little bit envious that you got to work with him for so many years.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Not in a bad way, but like, man, I wish I could do that.
It could have been you. How are your bass and guitar chops?
Non-existent. I don't have them. But
Well,
what I think that if you were to ask me my musical skills, I'm like the George Martin of the group. I'm the guy that can sit in the studio and go, all right, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? Let's I can't explain it to you, but that's what I'm good at. I'm a good coach. I'm a good, like, the guy that can sit next to the engineer or engineer myself and contribute that way. And I'm really good at, like, making people feel better about themselves, especially when they're having a bad day. I'm just like,
Oh.
I'm Tommy Boy.
Okay. Well, it's nice to meet you, Tommy boy.
All right. Well, we could see that we have brianray.com. You know, Speaking of George Martin, and I was just thinking about these records that you do on Wicked Cool Records. I want you to know that we have a whole station, New HD, where rock lives, which is a tribute to the famous NEW over here, which little Steven would be very familiar with. I worked with Scott Meany for years, and we don't call them new songs. We call them Wicked Cool Future Classics. It's all based,
Whoa.
yes, and it doesn't matter what label they're on; they're Wicked Cool Future Classics. So
I
I got
like that.
I got inspired by Little Steven just for that. I just think it's a great label name, and I like your fellow artist on that. Talking about that, and then I'll let you go because I know you're busy. I could talk to you for hours, by the way. Just let you know. We could talk about cars, music, whatever.
All right.
I think that when people get their record collection and they see mono on it, they're like, "Oh, it's not stereo." But I say, mono. There's something special about that mono sound that really jumps and makes that music come alive. What's your take on, and I wonder if it's the same as mine, but there's something special about that mono mix. We always see 5.1 in stereo, but that mono mix is really awesome to me.
Well, it's really something. It sort of seems like it's almost like a sleight of hand, right? That a mono mix still appears to have a stereo image. And that's the magic part of it. It isn't literally stereo, but it appears that way. And well, in the case of the Beatles, what I understand is that they were hands-on and present for every mono mix, but they weren't there and present for the stereo mixes until maybe much later, the last few albums, from my understanding. I could be wrong. I'm not also one of those guys that's a Beatle file that reads everything about the Beatles, but and there is something very special about that. Like, you have to have the right elements in your recording so that a mono mix, which is just the center, but spread over two speakers, sounds like you can differentiate the instruments. That's a real magic, and that's the way some of these great albums were intended. Certainly, all the albums that came before the late '60s were intended to be mono.
And just blast over that little 6-inch speaker, whatever you had, or your transistor radio. That's great.
Transistor radio.
All right, man. Fantastic. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to have to do this again soon. Again, big fan of your work. I love everything you do. As soon as I hear that you got a new record out, it goes right on the radio and I play the hell out of it. I just keep doing what you're doing because you bring joy to so many different people and you're just a cool dude. Right? I'm just going to tell you.
Zach, thank you so much, man. That means a ton to me. Thank you so much for that support. It means a lot to me, man. It makes it worthwhile. These days right now, we can use all the joy and the positive feedback and the positivity that we can possibly get. And I'm happy if I've been able to serve a little bit of that up.